find him in the bathroom with a knife trying to hurt himself, it would be a huge disrespect if I talk to another guy without telling him. They are just so good at getting what they want out of a relationship. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time to talk about 2 of my abusive relationships that lasted for years, but every time I try to talk about it, a lot of shame came out, and I find myself wondering, is it too vulnerable to share this online? Am I doing this just for the attention? What's gonna happen if my ex-boyfriends find out? But then I think about how shame is actually what keeps me staying in this kind of relationship for so long. Because of shame, I never told anybody what happened to me. I feel so ashamed of how I allowing myself to be treated and still couldn't get out of it. Now it's time for me to tell my story. My intention is that even if just one person can benefit from what I have to say, then you will make it worthwhile. So in this video, I want to talk about my story and some signs you might be in an abusive relationship, some tactics manipulators use to keep you trapped, how I get out eventually, and the lessons I learned. I went through 2 abusive relationships in my adult life. When I get out of my first one, I thought I would never allow myself to get into anything like that again. But just after a 3-year break, I found myself in another abusive relationship again. Now I can see so many similar patterns happening in these 2 relationships. There's actually a psychology term that can explain this called repetition compulsion. It basically means that our subconscious mind is trying to recreate a similar emotional dynamic even if the dynamic itself is not healthy for us. For example, if you grew up with an alcoholic father, you might find yourself end up with a boyfriend who's also an alcoholic because the whole emotional dynamic is just so familiar to you even if it's not healthy. I remember when I met my ex, I was in a very desperate position, craving love and attention which I didn't get from my last relationship. When I met my ex, he put all his attention onto me almost immediately, gave me a lot of compliments, made me think I'm so special, and said I'm his favorite person in this world. Everything just moves so fast and I feel like I met my soulmate, someone who truly loves me and understands me. Looking back, I can see that's love bombing right there, where it's common for an abuser to shower you with tons of attention and love in the early stage of a relationship, so you feel bonded to them already before they start to manipulate and control you. My ex also pushed me for a commitment before I felt ready. He would say something like, I don't want to do this if we are not officially together. I feel kind of pressured, but in the end I agree because the initial chemistry was just so strong, and that was a big mistake I made because I didn't spend enough time with him to find out who he actually is before I committed. Another thing is that he trauma dumped everything almost immediately when he just met me. He told me he had a really traumatic childhood and no one had really taken care of him and everybody in his life left him somehow, which made me feel so bad for him and made me think the whole world has treated him wrong somehow. I feel like people who tend to get into abusive relationships are loving, kind, agreeable person who tend to think anybody who's suffering is a victim, especially when you have savior complex and you think you have obligation to save anyone who's suffering. The problem with that attitude is that it doesn't protect you well from manipulative and abusive people, because truly malevolent people always camouflage themselves as victims and they take advantage of people who's highly empathetic. So I suggest all the highly empathetic people to familiarize yourself with symptoms of cluster B personality disorders and trying to avoid these people as much as possible. Now I want to talk about the signs of abusive relationships and the red flags everybody should be aware of. The first sign is unreasonable jealousy. One of my ex told me it would be a huge disrespect if I talk to another guy without telling him, and whenever I moved my location, I have to tell him as well, otherwise I will get millions of phone calls from him. It was just the scariest thing. Another ex will stalk my Instagram and check everybody I was following. When he find out I follow some model with some 6-pack which I don't even remember, he got super upset at me and I have to somehow apologize and prove my love to him. My ex also got really insecure whenever I put on makeup and go out. He would think that I was trying to seduce some other guys or something. Of course, in the end, I have to comfort him and apologize for that. What's most crazy to me is that he even got jealous of me spending more time with my family on Christmas than with him. When you are in an abusive relationship, they will make these crazy, ridiculous accusations on you all the time. They will try to isolate you from family and friends. They will twist your intention and words and make you feel guilty all the time. Honestly, it has nothing to do with you. It's them projecting their own insecurities and low self-esteem onto you in the name of love. So don't ever reduce your normal social circle whenever you are in a relationship. Otherwise, it's hard for you to get reality check outside of the relationship. And the second sign that I want to talk about is silence treatment. I think a lot of people don't realize that silence treatment is actually a form of abuse. I'm not talking about trying to cool things down a little bit after a big fight. I'm talking about using silent treatment to punish you intentionally or trying to get what they want. In my experience, my ex will literally stop talking to me for hours, even days, whenever he got upset at me. A lot of time I don't even know what I did wrong. So in the end, I have to beg them to tell me what's wrong, and I have to apologize to them first. I was just feeling so anxious and stressful the whole time when he withdrew, because I am always that kind of person who open to communicating whenever there's a problem comes out. I heard a comment online says silence treatment is when they do something to hurt you and you refuse to apologize. I find that so accurate. The problem with abusive relationship is that a lot of time you end up comforting them for something they did wrong and you have no idea what just happened there. And the third sign I want to talk about is emotional dysregulation, which includes yelling, screaming, breaking objects, name-calling, venting for hours for petty things. Their reaction is never proportionate to what actually happened. Sometimes my ex will keep yelling at me and pushing my triggers until I finally snapped, and then he will use that against me later, like how I also raise my voice and how I also say nasty things to him. He made it look like somehow we are equally wrong in this argument, that he started it, because he's not the only one who raised his voice, and I have to apologize to him for my part in the end. I remember one time me and my ex had argument over the tiniest thing, and we couldn't end the argument for hours. Later, when I tried to cool things down a little bit, I find him in the bathroom with a knife trying to hurt himself. I got so scared. I have to do anything or say anything I could to stop him from what he's doing. And that's a common trick he will use all the time. He will literally self-harm and say something like, I smashed myself for you, you know that? This just left me feel so scared and confused all the time. Sometimes I got a feeling that he always get what he wants in the end, no matter he's right or wrong, and I'm the one who always take the blame. It's just very toxic. Now I just realized that's how manipulative these people can be. Whether they behave this way consciously or not consciously, they are just so good at getting what they want out of a relationship. Sometimes they're even willing to hurt themselves for doing that. Somehow I feel entirely responsible for their stability and happiness. I feel like I have to work on eggshell all the time to avoid making them upset, because the emotional swing is just so crazy. At that point, I would do anything to avoid triggering them, even if that means I forget about my own needs completely. At this point, I feel like breakup wasn't even an option, because you are just so scared what they're gonna do to you or what they're gonna do to themselves. I tried to break up with them in the beginning for a few times, and it all ended badly because they will use suicide threats on me all the time. In my opinion, that's the worst thing you can ever do to someone, because it only works on the people who actually cares about you. I was just so young and naive back then, and I really thought it was the scariest thing if I made someone suicide because of me. I just could not let that happen, so I tried everything to avoid that. After a few times, I just know what's gonna happen if I try to break up with them. I never say anything to my family or friends and tell them truth, because I just feel so much shame and pain of how I was treated, and I still couldn't get out of it. And that's the scariest thing about abusive relationship. It's so hard to get out once you are in it already. You stay in an abusive relationship not because of love, it's because of trauma bond, which is a deep, unhealthy emotional connection to the abuser. Because the person who abused you is also the very person who gave you relief afterwards. Every time me and my ex argue, he will stop functioning in any other areas of his life. He won't eat, he won't sleep, let alone work in any way, until I apologize to him and try to make peace. It was a very exhausting process to go through. So when the argument finally finished, I feel like I finally have some relief to just normally function in my life. And that somehow feels like a luxury, and the whole emotional pattern are insanely similar. Near the end of relationship, I could even predict how long each argument is going to last, how he's gonna behave in these arguments, and how it's going to end. That's what makes trauma bond so powerful, because our nervous system gravitates towards what's familiar, even that means harm to us. When the abuser alternate between periods of abuse and periods of kindness and sometimes even remorse, this hooks our brain the same way that slot machine makes people addictive in a casino via what's called intimate reinforcement. Combined with manipulation tactics like Darvel fog, chronic victimhood, and helplessness. This creates a strong power imbalance in a relationship where they are the ones who take over the control completely, which makes it so hard to leave. I also want to mention that helplessness can be someone's biggest weapon. The biggest reason why I stay in this relationship for so long is that he has nobody else. At least that's what he made it look like. He has no family, no close friends, so I thought if I stop this relationship with him, he will literally not survive because I was also financially supporting him. He might just suicide because he couldn't handle it, or he might end up on the street and die. I truly believed so at that time. But looking back at it now, they all survived okay after I left. It was just easier for them if I took care of their needs and survival. But actually, it wasn't my responsibility to make sure anybody live with their dignity or comfort all the time. So I really want to tell people who's in a similar situation as I was before to stop enabling people, because people need to face the consequences of their own actions so they can learn and grow. I really like this quote says, what you call a crisis might be someone else's awakening. Sometimes people need to suffer from their own behaviors in order for them to grow, so let them. Near the end of relationship, I feel like I couldn't handle it anymore. After months of constant argue and tantrum, again, I got suicide threats from him, but this time, instead of just giving in to him and apologizing, and I finally started to look for help somewhere else. During the entire relationship, I never told anybody how I was being treated and how I even was financially supporting this person, because I just feel so ashamed, and I thought even if I say anything, no one would truly understand why I still stayed. But that time I was just so exhausted, and I finally went online and searching for advice people give on relationship. I remember searching for keywords like why you feel like you cannot get out of a relationship, what to do when you got suicide threats from your partner, black and white thinking, extreme emotional swings. Then I find more and more information that leads to abusive relationships and manipulative partner. For the first time in years, I finally realized I was actually in an abusive codependent relationship. You might think, well, that's kind of obvious, right? But back then, it literally never came across my mind, and I never really pictured myself in an abusive relationship. Probably because I never know what a healthy relationship would look like, and my nervous system are just so familiar with this intense high and lows, or probably due to a cognition distortion, because if I don't make excuses for his behavior, I have to face the painful fact that this person I cared so deeply was hurting me really bad, and staying in this relationship was destroying me, but still I couldn't leave because I thought if I leave, he would not survive. I was just not ready to face this painful fact because I was so emotionally and financially invested for so many years. Then I came across this subreddit community called BPD Loved Ones, and I find my ex at time fits perfectly into the characteristics of someone with borderline personality disorder. I found people on that subreddit sharing shockingly similar relationship patterns as I was experiencing. Just by looking at these posts online, I feel so seen and understood by this group of people online because I never told anybody in my real life. Then, out of a desperation, I made a post on this subreddit. I screenshotted our chat when he was in one of his episodes and gave me 3 side threats. I briefly talked about my real situation and asked for help. Then I got so many replies and advice from these people who had similar experience as me, who probably understand my situation better than anybody else in this whole world. I feel so supported, and I feel like I finally have the courage to face this situation again. Some replies are just served as a wake-up call for me. For example, someone said, "They will not change even if you sacrifice your whole life for it." And someone asked me, there are so many other people who's also suffering and who's probably in worse situation than him. Why only save him? I learned so much by just posting that, and it got me rethinking about the whole relationship dynamic and finally have the courage to walk away. I also learned that the only way to leave an abusive relationship is to go no contact or low contact and use the technique called gray stoning, which means you become indifferent to whatever they are saying or doing. You become unimportant interested and emotionally flat, and that's what an abuser most scared of. They are not scared of you giving negative feedback to them because that's how they learn that their trick still works on you. Once you stop giving any kind of emotional feedback, they will know that they lose control over you already. Then they will do whatever they have in their toolbox to try to pull you back into the old power dynamic. But if you just stay indifferent and avoid JED, which is short for justify, argue, defense, and explain, then they can no longer do any harm to you anymore. And that's what I did in the end. No matter what kind of yelling, phone bombing, even suicide threats I got, I kept grinning sternly and giving no emotional response. Even though I was still feeling very devastated and scared all the time, he quickly learned that I was not surrendering to him like I always do before, and I was just behaving different now. Soon he ran out of tactics from his toolbar, and he learned that even suicide threats won't work on me now. Then you know what, the whole power dynamic just shifted, and he started saying nice things to me and apologized to me and even trying to remorse. I was almost gonna believe him, but luckily I kept my position strong by getting support from this subreddit community. Gradually, I just learned how manipulated I was by all his tricks and tactics. I finally wake up and look at this relationship from an outsider's perspective. I'm no longer allowing myself to be taken for granted anymore. But still, it takes a long time to completely walk away, and there's so many mixed feelings along the way as well, like guilt, grief, shame, sadness, emptiness, anger. But as soon as I process these initial feelings and equip myself with more knowledge and awareness, I felt 1,000,000 times better being single than being in these relationships. I feel so grateful that God has some other plans for me than just serving these abusers' needs. I also feel so proud of myself for having the courage to walk away. After that, I promised myself that I would pause on dating for at least 2 years, because since I was 18, I kept jumping from one relationship into the next one with no break in between. I think it's time for me to learn from my previous relationship and to truly work on myself and heal before I start dating again. I also promised myself I will never let anybody treat me like that again, so I write down all these red flags and signs. I also wrote down some non-negotiable qualities that I look for in my future partner. Of course, I'm not just demanding my future partner to have these qualities, I'm also requiring myself to have these qualities first. I try to equip myself with as much knowledge as possible. So here I want to share some lessons I learned along the way so you can avoid making the same mistakes as me. The first one is always listen to your nervous system. Pay attention to how you feel in a relationship. Do you feel more anxious, scared, guilty, overthinking all the time? Or do you feel content, peaceful, and secure? Do you feel more organized or more chaotic around this person? No kind of relationship is worth you keep doubting, guessing, overthinking, because real love will make you feel better about yourself, not less. Don't confuse intensity with intimacy. The second lesson is separate intention from impact. Every time my ex did something horrible to hurt me, and he would apologize to me afterwards and said that wasn't his intention, that he didn't mean any bad. But people can mean well and do real damage. These two things can be true at the same time. Good intention don't erase your pain or cancel out the effect. The harm has occurred regardless of the intention behind it. You have the right to make the choice for yourself based on how you feel to walk away from this relationship. The third lesson I learned is that don't fall for people's potential, fall for what they are right now. Because you can never change someone in your life. You only can filter out the people in your life. Forcing personal growth on someone else never works. People only change on their own term. People only change when life hurts them. And you are not responsible for unlocking someone else's potential. The only person you can do that is yourself. You can still see potential in another person and still choose to walk away. The fourth lesson is that someone can say they love you but still don't have any capability to carry out what that word means. Pay attention to how they deal with little annoyances and pressure in life, because there's always gonna be challenges in life, Anyone can show you love and affection in the early stage, but after the initial passion faded away, that's what you have to deal with for the rest of your life. And be careful if they are only nice to you in the beginning but very mean to others, because that's how they're gonna treat you in the end. In the end, I just want to say, if you are currently in an abusive relationship, please walk away. I know things can be very complicated with families and kids and stuff. Try to be around people who can actually support you, and take your time to have an exit plan. I've put some resources in the description that helped me enormously before, and that also hope that it can be helpful to you in some way. No life decision is more important than who you journey with, so take your time before you settle. If you got out of an abusive relationship already, I just want you to remember that you are not a victim. You are a survivor. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.